and we are going to get started. Thanks for being here today. My name is Emily Wirtz. I use she, her pronouns. I'm based in Austin, Texas. I'm pretty sure based on registration numbers coming in this morning that a lot of y'all are here from the broader museum world, which is amazing. That's also my professional background. I now do consulting and coaching and training, but my background is in education nonprofit, specifically out of school time programs through museums and science centers. So when the pandemic started, I realized, oh, we're going to be using some kind of virtual tool and a whole bunch for a ton of things, like in ways that, at that point I hadn't really fully considered, but because I had taught lots of programs to teach adults how to eventually teach kids how to use technology and engineering activities and things like that, I was like, okay, I can probably figure something out and then help people get their programs up and running. And so I did a little bit of research. It seemed like Zoom was a good option. It's a really good price point, I think, for a lot of the small nonprofit style folks that I work with mostly. It was easy for me to be able to afford to buy it for a year. And since mid-March, I have trained hundreds and hundreds of people now. I definitely don't know how many, probably close to 1,000, mostly in sessions like this. They're free group sessions or like specifically for specific groups. How to get oriented on Zoom and use it better and more effectively. It feels like something really tangible I can do. And I have some like interesting, side projects that are coming out of that, but mostly it's just like, I really want to support people in what is otherwise a really challenging year. So that is a little bit about me. This training specifically, I've been offering monthly. This one, which is kind of the Zoom setting overview, and then also every month. And so in 2 weeks, I'll offer a corollary that's advanced features in Zoom that goes deeper dive into how to run breakout rooms and some of the more advanced features. So you're welcome to come to that too. It's on my website. I'll share the links to all that. I have the registration page already up. So I would encourage you to check those out. I also have a video already of the advanced training that I did a couple months ago already on my website. So if you know you can't come and want to watch a video of 2 more hours of me talking about Zoom, you're welcome to do that. I think the trainings are fun and I'd encourage you to come, but do what you can. It's hard to show up in all of the ways right now. So this is the link to that advanced features in Zoom. It's going to be on September 22nd. So it's the same day of the week and same time. It's in chat right there. And mostly today, again, we're going to be covering the Zoom settings for the Zoom Pro account. So that is the $150 a year account. If you have a nonprofit that has access to TechSoup, there is a $65 discount, so you get it for $65. It is the Pro account, which is what I'm using right now. It's either that $150 a year or $15 a month. So if you buy it for the whole year, you get it for you get 2 months free basically. And a lot of the settings are similar for the other types of accounts. And if you only have a free account with Zoom, the big difference in terms of like usability there's a couple of features that you don't get with the free account, but mostly it has to do with the length of time your session can be if you have more than 2 people on the call. So with a free account, if you have 3 accounts, 3 people connected to the call, your call can only be 40 minutes, 40 minutes long. If you have the paid account, you can have up to 100 participants included in that for up to 24 hours. So this training could go up to 24 hours. I'm on Zoom all the time and I have not, more than 3 hours is really, at once is, about as much as I can take. So, but 40 minutes would be pretty limiting. So that is the big difference between that free and Pro account. I see Christina's got a question in the chat. What kind of setup would you recommend for educational programs and museums? What would you recommend a studio setup? And Christina, are you talking about hardware specifically, like microphones, cameras, lighting? or in terms of like Zoom account more. And feel free to come off mute if you'd like, or just type in the chat. I think the pro account, to speak a little bit to the Zoom side of things, I think the pro account is probably the one you want. I can talk a little bit more about pricing, but you might want 1 or 2 pro accounts that you share amongst your staff. You probably do not have enough people to make it worthwhile to get a business or enterprise account. And we can talk about that too in a little bit. And then I have some links to hardware and resources. Basically, it doesn't take a whole lot. I would say a lot of folks, if you have, it looks like Eileen is using like wired headphones that might come with a phone, and those sound pretty good. I would say one of the best things to do is just call a friend on Zoom and test out different headphones and microphones and lighting you have, and be like, does this sound good? Does this sound better? Is that one weird? And just test to see what sounds okay. Lighting wise, your enemy is backlight. So that's a window right there, and it's dark today in Austin, but it still seems very bright. And if those curtains were open, I would be like witness protection style. Which you've probably seen if you've been on Zoom calls. So even though you're like, oh, it's nice over here by the window, that's like the worst thing you can do. And then what you can't see is I have a light. I had a other version of this before, but I have a little IKEA light. It's like a $10 desk light pointing basically at my head in front of me. So it's on the other side of my computer, just pointing kind of right above my head. So it's casting like somewhat bright light at me. And that's a little bit better in terms of lighting. And then I would say, you know, if you can find a webcam, that's great. You don't necessarily need it as long as your computer has something decent. And also, I think for hosting calls, having a second monitor is like one of the most important and most useful tools you can have. So if you have access at all, like think of all of the SAD monitors that are sitting in your office. Like if you have any way to liberate those monitors and get one back and like get access to it, it'll make your life so much better, because right now I can have Zoom on this screen, and then I have a monitor next to me that has the slides I'm about to share and my Spotify like up on different, you know, like in different windows, so I can see those. And that makes a huge difference from switching back and forth between things and sharing things out. And it takes a little bit of, you know, a little bit of a rigmarole. So those are some great questions. I'll keep monitoring the chat to see what other people pop up with. Feel free to add things in the chat as we go, and I'll take, you know, periodic time to jump out and do that. I do want to share that all of the stuff I'm sharing in this training, and including eventually the video, I really don't like video editing, but I will do it eventually, will eventually be on my website at wildlysupportive.com/Zoom. And so I just pasted that link in chat. There are links to all the slide decks that I've made so far and keep on updating and making about Zoom. And I have like a folder of Zoom resources that talks a little bit about some of the like decent webcams you might be able to find, headsets, things like that, the hardware setups. And it has my slide deck for this training, my slide deck for the advanced features, the video for advanced features in Zoom, and a handful of other things, because now this is like my whole world. So please feel free to use that. I'll also email out after this training all of those resources that I shared today. So you don't have to save the chat, but you can. Note about Zoom, if you're on a computer, you can save the chat in the chat box, because I have that turned on in my setting to let my participants save their chat. So next to the little chat box, it's like to everyone, and it says file, and then there's a ... If you click on that ... it'll open up a menu, and the top feature should be save chat. And you can save the chat. You can do it now, and it'll save it for the whole call or whenever you leave. And a TXT file will be made on your computer in your documents folder. When you installed Zoom, it created a folder that's called Zoom in your documents folder. You probably don't know it's there unless you have to check it a bunch like I do. And there'll be a folder for each of the meetings you've gone to that you save chats or files from. And so it'll be like time-stamped with today. It'll be called whatever I called this meeting, and that's where the file of chat will be. So good info. We're already learning all together. I hope you learn a lot of things. I hope you share new things with me. I hope you ask me questions that I don't know the answer to yet, so I can find out what that answer is and send it out in email to everybody, because that's also keeping me very up to date with, you know, ways to learn new features in Zoom. So in a slide deck that I'm going to share today, I'm going to share the link right now, and I'm going to do some kind of on and off screen sharing. I don't love screen sharing because it forces everybody's view to go full screen, and it's kind of disorienting, and it feels like you don't know where the chat box is and all that good stuff. So this is kind of like, I do it when I have to, and I don't love it. So it's something to think about, especially if you're facilitating like public workshops or events, that it is kind of jarring for your audience. And again, I think someone just joined, so I'm gonna share that link one more time. See if y'all can jump in there. Is that link working for anybody? I don't see anybody joined on this, on the document. There we go, cool. So since it's a Google, the nice thing about it being a Google slide deck is that I can edit it and I don't have to update that link anywhere or send it out again. So I am very regularly, every time Zoom updates their settings, I go in and update this slideshow, and then anybody who's taken my workshops, and when it's linked to my website, it just goes directly to my most updated version. So I really like pairing Zoom with Google Drive specifically because I don't have to resend out updated links. Someone I work with, who I'm helping her with her craft classes that she used to be able to teach in person, she's teaching sewing online now. You know, she set up her supplies list for her students is just a Google slide deck, and it's like, if you're going to take the class where you learn about embroidery, here's what you need, and then if she adds a new class for, you know, she adds a new slide for it with those supply lists. So she doesn't have to, it's just one link, and she can keep updating it and not having to send it out all the different times. So another kind of hack for your programs and your public programs world. So this mostly is a slide deck of the way Zoom's settings are, and I'll share my screen in just a second for those of you who it's easier to see. It's kind of boring, heads up, but I think the most useful way, I'm gonna go through and point out some highlights today, but I think one of the most useful ways you can engage with it is after this call and with your Zoom account, open up this slide deck and open up your settings for your Zoom account and go through and decide, okay, Emily talked about private chat and why she has it set up. Do we want private chat turned on or off for our account? And go through each of the different choices you have in the Zoom settings and decide where you want to set them for your account. So again, I'll kind of talk through those things, and that information is mostly all on that slide deck. So I'm going to share the link one more time because we had one more person join. And then I will jump into screen sharing. If anybody has any questions before we dive into the screen share, feel free to type them in the chat or come off mute and just blurt them out. Cool. I'm going to stop the share that I was doing that was for the music at the beginning if you're here for that. So you probably didn't even notice that I just stopped it. And then I'm going to jump into my Zoom settings. And I'll show you that, Tim. That's a great question. It is worth pointing out where the Zoom settings actually are. So let me jump over to screen share. So apologies in advance. It's going to force you to see my Firefox and not all of the things you want to see. So here we go. There is the slide deck. And if you go to zoom.us, which is the Zoom website, it looks like this. And then you log in. I'm already logged in to this account. I go to my account, and then I click on settings right here in the sidebar. And that, all of these little guys is what we'll be talking about today in this training. So again, you go to zoom.us, you log in, you go to my account, and then settings in this sidebar on the left. So this is my recommendations for how to set up your Zoom settings for, especially for, you know, public sessions. Like some of these will be practical and useful and good tips for your general, like I'm having happy hour with my friends situations, but most of them, you know, you're going to really be like, oh, if we do anything for the public, you know, for work or whatever that looks like, we're going to really want to make sure, you know, we're following these along. So back to the slide settings. Here's all that info, how to get in touch with me. Here's some info about me and a picture of me when I had hair. And just some quick orientation materials about Zoom. You know, I like to have this slide essentially on all of my Zoom calls, and I also recently made one for mobile that I didn't add into this slide deck, so I will very soon, and you'll be able to go to it and see it so that folks know where the mute button is, the start-stop video, the see participants list or rename yourself, the chat window, how to share screens, these reactions, and how to exit the meeting. So again, if you're doing public sessions, I think it's a good idea. You can even literally screenshot this out of my training and add it to your, like, feel free to do that. And then just a quick note, if you don't already have it, you might want to update your Zoom, specifically if you want to have the other reactions, or very importantly, if you want a pizza hat, which I have now, if you can see me. So the latest version of Zoom, which is a couple weeks old now, has these like video filters that you can have turned on or off. I can be a unicorn. Pizza hat is kind of my whole vibe. So if you want those, or if you want the more reactions, make sure you're running the latest update in Zoom. Slide number 4 talks about how to update your Zoom. I would say that's worth checking every couple of weeks. Sometimes the updates are big and important, and sometimes they're like very minor bug fixes, but especially if you're running public sessions, you're gonna wanna keep up with that. This is where I make notes. Slide 5 is where I make notes about recent additions to Zoom updates so that you can be like, wait, what does that mean? Is that important? Do I need to worry about that? So that's where that is. And then a note about how to use the slide deck. Basically, like I said, it's connected to information about the Zoom Pro account, which is the $150 a year account. Lets you have up to 100 participants on a call for up to 24 hours per meeting. Only lets you have one meeting at a time on that account. So I can't share this account with somebody else and they are also running a meeting at 3:23 p.m. Central Time today. But if we wanted a new meeting that starts at 5:30 today, I can still use this account for that. And basically, I recommend you log into Zoom, go to settings, and follow along through all of these things to do it, you know, on your own time after this training, but I will cover some of the highlights today. And again, if you have questions that come up or things you want to see, go ahead and type them in chat. This is when you first log into Zoom, it looks like this. That picture that is there, the icon, in my case, it's my logo, that is what appears if I stop my video. So I just stopped my video right now, and so that icon is there. So if you've seen people with like their headshots or a picture, like that's how they're doing it. They're going into their account, they're putting their logo or their headshot or whatever there. You can also turn those off in settings. I work a lot with educators, and you can imagine a lot of the things I'm going to talk about are ways that kids will A, know technology better than any of us, and B, learn how to subvert it in naughty ways to be naughty, because it's fun to be naughty, and you know, everything's a mess right now. So any picture that is on the internet or could be on the internet could be the image that they put instead of a nice logo or a nice actual picture of themselves or their favorite cartoon character. It could be something wildly inappropriate. So you now, Zoom is realizing and trying to keep up with, but I would say it's a lot of work, the ways in which we're having to use Zoom now that are not like professional meeting ways like they were in February before times. So now you can turn off in your settings that people can have their pictures or not. My settings are, I'm almost exclusively working with adults like this format who then go work with kids. And I don't care. Maybe, you know, on this call, Beth has her picture. Maybe Beth chose to have a very inappropriate picture. It's not, it's lovely, but I would be like, okay, like y'all can handle it. That's a weird choice. It doesn't look bad for anybody else. But again, I'm not teaching, you know, groups of children directly for most of my things. So something to keep in mind. A lot of this talk, a lot of what we cover will be kind of like the range of why you might make those decisions and why you might not. Also, I have my display name as my company name. So every time I join a call, it says that my name is Wildly Supportive and I have to rename myself. So that can change. You can change that. This could say Emily Wirtz instead of Wildly Supportive. It's up to you, you know, depending on the use of your account. If you go to participants window, that's where you can rename yourself, or I believe you can do it now from, if you find your little image in the pictures, you click on the dot next to your name at the top, next to your picture, and there's a rename and you can rename yourself. This is also a thing I could turn off. It's also a place I can rename myself right now. I can rename myself something bad because I'm a naughty kid. I could just rename myself Naughty Kid. So right now you see that my name is something bad. Y'all could name yourself something bad. You could put any words there that are appropriate or not. So that is also something you can turn off in settings. So I think it's extremely useful for a lot of things. Not just because I usually put my name, my pronouns, and the location I'm joining from. That seems very useful. Sometimes you might put like your name and the grade you teach, and then you can see automatically how many, you know, teachers you have that work with elementary versus middle school students or things like that. So it can be very handy, and like many things, it can be abused. So this is kind of the main overview of Zoom when you log in. The personal meeting ID, if you just go to start an instant meeting, it's using your personal meeting ID. That is a unique URL that is for your account that is kind of like in the before times, think of it as like office hours or just like checking into your meeting, like checking into your office, being like, oh, hey, are you there, Tim? Can we chat? So anybody who has that link can click on it, and anytime you have your personal meeting room open or you're logged into Zoom, someone can just appear. So I almost never use it. Even if I'm like just checking in with friends later today, or if we were talking, it was like, hey, let's get on, let's get on a quick call really quick. I would send you an actual link. And I would say if you are going to use it, definitely still have a waiting room. I've heard some minor horror stories about people having like an important meeting with one set of parents on the personal meeting ID and the other set of parents coming a little bit early and then just suddenly being in on the call, right? So if you don't have that waiting room turned on, anybody can use that link at any time and just be there. So I don't use the personal meeting ID very much. Some people it might be handy. I would say still have waiting rooms enabled. So down into settings on slide number 8, this is where the good stuff starts. So I've been talking about waiting rooms. I have waiting rooms turned on for all of my meetings, and that like literally is like if it's a meeting with like just me and my mom, like I still have a waiting room. I think that's the #1 security feature. And it's the thing you need to, I think, prioritize having. So every time somebody joins a call of mine, they go into the waiting room first. Y'all have just had that experience, and I let them in one at a time. I don't know, as far as I can tell based on the names, I don't know any of y'all that are joining today. So it's not like I know for sure that Rachel isn't going to be a jerk on this call. I'm just hopeful that Rachel's here for all the right reasons to learn about Zoom. And if I was a classroom teacher or like had a registration list where people had paid money, I could check, or I work for, I help out with the Austin Modern Quilt Guild. And so we have a membership list of like 250 people, and we have these monthly meetings that about 75 of our members have been coming to. And we literally like have the list pulled up and make sure that everybody we're letting in out of the waiting room is a current member of the Austin Modern Quilt Guild. So that's, something to think about and do. And so I would say waiting rooms, very much you want them turned on. They're kind of, some of these things are turned on by default, some of them you have to go turn them on. Right now, waiting rooms is turned on by default, so that's handy. I say that everybody goes into the waiting rooms. You can customize your waiting room by saying a message. I find that a lot of times if you do that, this is like for your whole account, right? So if you say like, welcome to the meeting on Tuesday, September 8th, that will still be the message like in 3 months if you don't go and change it. So I would say make a very general message like, thank you so much for coming. The host will be with, let you in for the waiting room in a minute. Or thank you so much for supporting the Science Center. We can't wait to chat with you. We'll open the meeting in just a second. So that's where you'd go to customize it. And then passcodes. So I believe that this, yeah, Tiffany, that's a good question. I'll cover that in just a second. Passcodes, I believe that this meeting had a passcode, but you probably didn't have to type in an actual passcode because I have it embedded in the link. So we'll talk about that in a second. The other thing about passcodes is it's not like there's a separate passcode for different people. So Jessica did not have a separate passcode from Carrie, who did not have a separate passcode from Jenny to join this call. It's just all one passcode. So it's better than not having them in terms of security, but it's not it's not like you have a special password and once you use it, it's like, well, Tim's here, so Tim's friend, Idiot Steve can't also just join this call, because if Tim sends the link and the passcode to Idiot Steve can definitely still join this call. So think about that in terms of like how you're managing, who's coming into your session. And we can talk about that it's basically non-technical. It's basically just like having support and having co-hosts know how to kick people out of the session or being ready to like dump people back into the waiting room or remove them from the call in terms of security. Luckily, I very rarely have to do that. So hopefully you won't at all. Tiffany asked, can I turn the waiting room off when the program starts in case people are late? I don't want to have to keep watching for it. That's a great question. I believe, let me stop my share really quick so I can see all of the controls. I'm the host of this call, so I have a couple extra controls on my bar down at the bottom. One of them is a security badge, and from that security badge, it says that the waiting room is enabled, and that is checked. So if I uncheck that, I believe that the waiting room will turn off. I would say it's not safe to turn it off. So what I have turned on, and I'll talk about this in a second when we get to it, is every time someone enters the waiting room, I hear a tone. The host and the co-host only hear that sound the way my account is turned on. So I am just paying attention to, like, even though I was screen sharing and talking about something else, there were people coming into the session and I was just letting them in because I get a little notice each time that's happening. That can be distracting. I would say, just from a terms of like not wanting to be Zoom bombed and not wanting jerks to like suddenly flood into your meeting, I would recommend having the waiting room up the whole time. I would say people are going to come late. It's 2020 and like things are weird and you never know when your kid is, needing some kind of emergency online, school help situation. So I would say keep the waiting room open, have a waiting room, but have somebody either on your call who their sole job really is to let people in from the waiting room, or that you have those tones turned on and you're monitoring it as you present. Where do we enter a message for people entering the waiting room? In settings on the Zoom host? Yeah, so it is in that settings page. So I'll share my screen in just a second, but it says customize waiting room and you'll see that, and that's where you'll pop up and you can adjust those things. Good questions, y'all. Let's keep going. I'm going to share my screen again. Back at it. Feel free to keep adding questions in the chat if you think of them. So right here, Tim, that customized waiting room is where you would change the, if you wanted it to say like, welcome to the museum's, session. We'll let you in just a second. You would click on that customized waiting room thing. From the chat, if there are people in the waiting room, you can chat to everyone in the waiting room. and send them a message. So if if this meeting was kicking off late or something, or, just saying like, just a second, we'll be right with you, I can broadcast that message to everyone in the waiting room. I can't independently broadcast and they can't message back to me. So it's like a one-way, like I can tell them a thing, but they can't chat back.
And is that only in the Pro account?
I am not sure. I think it's in all of them. Most of these things are in all of them now, but I can look that up. The Pro account, I would recommend, because otherwise it's very limited with that only 2 people can be on a call if it's going to be more than 40 minutes. So
great. Yeah, we have both. I'm just looking out.
Yeah, cool. Awesome.
I'm looking at the non-Pro one. That's what's going on.
Yeah, totally. It might be. Yeah. So a lot of these are just like, do you require passcodes? Again, sure, let's require passcodes for everything as much as possible. Might as well. And you can turn those off when you're actually making a meeting. So if I go to schedule a meeting, some of these features, I can go, this is in Zoom, I go to zoom.us, I go to schedule a meeting. This is like the meeting template. Some of these things like passcodes and waiting rooms, I can turn off from here, even though my account default is that there are passcodes for all my meetings and there are waiting rooms for all my meetings. If I know like this is just me and my dumb friends happy hour, I don't need a passcode, I'll still have a waiting room because I don't want someone to just inadvertently get that link and jump in there, but I could like uncheck this box and then there wouldn't be a passcode for that call, for that specific meeting. So my default is a little bit more locked down than maybe some of the actual things I'm going to select depending on the nature of each of those meetings I'm making. So again, like I mentioned, there was a passcode for this meeting, but y'all probably didn't have to type it in. That's because I have my passcodes embedded in the link. So it just is a one-click link to join. It has the passcode and the meeting ID in the link. If you've ever been on a meeting where you've actually had to enter the passcode, that's unclick this. And then your people would actually have to enter the passcode. My tendency, especially for groups that are like just learning Zoom, or it's a lot of educators, a lot of quilters, a lot of people who aren't necessarily that tech savvy, I'm just interested in like making it as easy as possible for people to join the calls and not be like, I don't know where the passcode went, I couldn't find it. So I'm just like, great, I added the, it's in the link. So if you have the link, you have the passcode, but you might want to turn that off. Definitely sometimes when I help with like big events, we do turn that off and we say the password is not embedded and people do have to put the actual link in. Require passcode for participants joining by phone. Again, I have that set and my link is embedded. So I also have only authenticated users can join meeting turned off, again, in the interest of as many people getting into my sessions as possible. And this is something I would turn on if I was doing, like, I had to help with an event that was for the Texas Parks and Wildlife Department, and they had much stricter, security obligations and things that they need to make sure of. And so only authenticated users can join meetings requires that everybody is logged into a Zoom account. It can be a free account, but they have to be logged in. So if you went to click that link and you weren't logged in, it would tell you to log in. And if you didn't have an account, you would have to sign up and make a free account and then log in. So that's a good-ish security thing. That way you can report people if they were on the call and behaving poorly. You can report them, and there's like some amount of accountability, although I don't know how much Zoom is keeping up with that, like I don't, what are they going to do? But it's one more thing. And then same thing, only authenticated users can join from the web client. There is a fully web-based version of Zoom, and like that might sound weird because you feel like we're on the web, but we're actually using the Zoom application now, almost certainly. And even though you clicked a link probably from your email, it opened a Zoom application. So if you can't get on the Zoom application, there is a web browser-based version that's limited features, and that's what that's referring to. So a lot of students, especially that are using Chromebooks, might only be using the web browser version, which has limited features. So that's what that's referring to. On to slide 11. I have my default set so that when I start a meeting, my video, the host video, and my participants video is off. So y'all noticed probably, and some of you haven't come off video off, which is totally fine, that your videos were off. And if you want to turn them on, you need to go ahead and do that in the controls, or if you can't find them, ask me. And I do this mostly in the interest of just like letting people get settled. And like I would prefer to see people's faces, because otherwise it really feels like I'm talking to myself in my own room about Zoom, and that's like kind of wild. I'm pretty used to it now, but it's also totally fine. And I want to fully recognize that like using video does use up bandwidth. So it's, you know, a problem if you're in, you know, I work in Texas, so a lot of the folks that I'm talking to are like in rural areas where they might have like really low bandwidth and satellite internet, and so they're just not coming off of video because they can't, you know, like otherwise the call will be so slowed down that they can't, you know, hear me in any reasonable amount of time. So this is something you can decide. And again, this is something you can change in that meeting. You can say like, you can change, even though my settings are to default that the video's off for host and participant, I could change it and say like, I do want video on when you join. So that's something to consider. Rachel has a question. I ran some Zoom meeting for my side business that were 3 people plus me. Is it 3 people total that forces you to stick to 40 minutes? Yeah, anything more than 2 people. So if it's me, if it's like just me and Tim on a free account, we can talk for longer than 40 minutes. But as soon as we have, you know, Eileen join, then 40 minutes is the cap, and it's going to bump you off. So, and you can just restart it. But like for a public program, you're probably not going to want to be like, okay, after I read this story, it's going to kick everybody off, and then I'm going to send a new link, and you're going to hear the second story time book, you know, like join back on. So it's going to probably be worth, yeah, getting the paid account or finding somebody with a paid account, because luckily, like a lot of folks have them right now. So yeah, that's the 3 people thing is what you're running into. Absolutely. Again, for audio type, I have let people join by computer or telephone audio in the interest of just getting here and getting online however you can. You could say that you have to join with your computer audio, but then like if their computer works fine for everything else, but their speaker doesn't work or whatever, you know, that's not so great. So I've had that. I never changed that setting. Here's another setting I never changed, join before host. Join before host would be, this is off. So nobody can join this meeting before me. So if I had it turned on and Tiffany and Jessica showed up 5 minutes early and they clicked the link, they would just be in the session together, just like, hey, are you leading this? Oh, I think it's somebody named Emily, you know, and you'd like be there together, and I wouldn't be there yet, and then they'd come on and join. So again, even for my idiot friends having happy hour, I still make them wait for the host. I think, you know, this is definitely like one of those relics of the before time style of meetings where it's like, whatever, we're, you know, only these 8 coworkers are ever using the Zoom account, so it's fine if like we're working together. And it's not like a public program where somebody's waiting for things. So no worries, Jenny. Again, personal meeting ID, I have it enabled. I don't use it very much. You could turn it on or off. On the account that I share, I'm on the board of directors for the Texas Informal Science Education Association, and we just turned it off just to make sure that like people weren't accidentally using it and then having people come in and out, because we're sharing that account basically with all the board members. So that might be why you want to turn it off. And again, I very rarely use my personal meeting ID. If you have questions about that, I can dig around a little bit. All of these red links on here are like going to Zoom tutorials and more information about those features. And then mute participants upon entry. This is also something that I have turned on, and you could turn it off in your actual, when you make a meeting, I could unclick this or turn it on. This means that when you join the meeting, you're on mute. This is handy, I think, especially now when kids are having meltdowns or your dog's barking or you don't realize like it doesn't seem loud in your house, but your neighbor's mowing their lawn, and for some reason that gets picked up on audio. And if you have like public people joining the call, Zoom is optimized to try to find like who's talking or where the sound is coming from. And so sometimes even those like kind of mild incidental background noises will pick up, and it'll make it hard for other people to hear everything. So I usually, almost all the time, my calls, you come in on mute and I say, you know, hi folks, you're joining, you're on mute, your video's off. If you'd like to come off mute, you're welcome to, or like, please stay on mute if it's like a fancy presentation or something, or, you know, come off mute now to say hi. And then when we start our story time, I'll put you all on mute again, or whatever that looks like. So that is also a handy feature. Any questions thus far? We're trucking right along. Cool. Slide 14. I have these upcoming meeting reminders turned off, but you can have Zoom send an upcoming meeting reminder like from the Zoom system if you're logged in. I just live or die by my Google Calendar right now, and that's where all of my like, hey, you have a call in 10 minutes, so you can choose to have those on or off. That's what that one is about. I have require encryption for third-party endpoints turned off, mostly because I don't do anything with state secrets or company secrets because I'm just my own person working for myself now. So this would require that anybody who's joining the calls would have encrypted connections. Zoom has its own some amount of encryption. I don't think it's that likely that your security risk, even if you're talking about some, you know, if you're talking about like, you know, your strategic plan for the next 2 years or something, and you don't really want a bunch of stakeholders using it, I would say it's safe for those things. If you're talking about like the nuclear codes, you probably want to turn off encrypted things or turn on encryption. Yeah, Mill, that's a great question. How can I share screen and still see a class of 16 to 25 people? So I would say this is a time for your, for the 2 monitor situation potentially. If you're looking at it right now, you can also probably do this a little bit. For shared screen, it forces you to go full screen. You might have a little window of participants, and there are these little boxes. So what I did right now, I am watching all of you on this call. It says there are 15 people on the call right now. I pulled out the window of folks and I made that box bigger. And so I can see everybody right now. And that's all I'm looking at on one screen. And then I have my shared screen on my other monitor. And so it can be done. It's a little finicky. And every time I share screen, I have to set that back up and do that again because it defaults to going full screen in annoying ways. So it's a little bit of like, that's also why, I mean, I'm very used to doing it now because I'm on Zoom all the time, but it's also why I do take the time to say like, okay, we're going to go full screen. If you want to, you know, exit out of, you know, or share a screen, if you want to exit out of full screen, you can to find the chat. Like I have the little chat window up separately floating to disconnected from what I'm doing. So it's like, it feels like, I don't know, it's like, you know, Iron Man where it's like all these screens and little windows floating. It's a little bit of that. But yeah, that's a great question. I can definitely show you that a little bit better. Unfortunately, with sharing screen, like you can't see exactly my layout, but I can try to guide you through that a little better. So I would say require third-party encryption is not a big deal unless you're really worried about state secret level things, and it's going to make it harder for people to join. So if you're doing like a story time or a meet the scientist activity or something, like don't worry about it. It's, you know, people are just going to be like, wait, I couldn't join because I wasn't encrypted enough or whatever. Chat, y'all have mostly, it seems like, figured out where chat is. Again, I'm mostly working with adults, so I have chat turned on. I have chat, y'all can save the chat if you want to. You could turn that off. You could not let people save the chat. And I also am allowing private chat. So if you want to private chat with somebody, you can find their name in that little drop down menu and click on that, and it'll say like, now it says like chatting to Megan, and it says in red parentheses privately. And so I can send Megan a secret message. I just said hi, but y'all don't see that. Only Megan does. And so that is a thing that I can enable. I can turn that on or turn that off in my account. I would say there's probably a lot of teachers who are like, hell no, I'm not turning on private chat with my kids. But also I would say that like they're just on their phones texting each other or doing any number of private message sharing anyway. So for me, it's a couple of things. It's like, you know, if Beth is really talking to Tim about like, wow, Emily is a real piece of work, am I right? And wants to say that, I'm like, that's fine. Like, I can handle it. I'm not that worried about it. And I do think it's very useful because somebody might say like, oh, I work at this history museum. And then someone else might say, I work at a history museum too. And y'all might get on like on a side tangent and share resources that don't need to be in the whole chat record necessarily. So I think it's useful, and I trust you. So I have it turned on, and I totally understand settings where you would not want, you know, I can understand there being meetings where you don't want chat on at all. So turning it off entirely in your settings is something you can do. You can also turn it off again from that security badge button that I have as the host. I can just unclick chat and y'all won't be able to chat at all. It's not just that private chat or unprivate chat. It's not that granular, unfortunately. So when I save the chat, my chat record is just the things that I see. Same with y'all. So in my chat, I will see, even though I'm the host and I'm the owner of this account, I won't see if Tim and Beth were talking trash about me behind my back. I won't see that in my chat file, and they'll see it on theirs, and that's fine. And so that's the way this account works. As far as a pro account goes, I'm not sure. There are like business and enterprise accounts that are more linked from admins, but they require that you're paying $20 a month per user, and you have to do that for at least 10 users. So those are, you know, that's a lot more money than, you know, you would want probably for most of your even like smallish, medium-sized organizations. You're probably just going to want to have a couple of pro accounts that you share. So I don't have access to like a mega chat record of all of the things that everybody has said. I just see like what everybody's chats to everybody and what people privately chat to me. Any questions about chat? I have auto saving chat turned on my account. This is on slide 15. That means that after every call I do, even some friend chats, a chat file is saved and it goes into my documents folder. And now I have hundreds of little text files, TXT files that were like the chat from that one time your friend shared a link of a cute cat video or whatever. And so, you know, that's the whole chat record is one TXT file. Sometimes a call will have like barely any chat, and sometimes it'll be lots and lots of things, and it'll just be a longer document. And I have it set so that all of my chats are saved on my end, so that if somebody is like, wait, can you email me? And they put their email address in the chat, or if they say, this is an amazing podcast you should listen to, or make sure you're doing this thing, or can you follow up with me about that, that I don't have to remember that, because pandemic brain is real and it's hard to remember things right now. And then I can be like, wait, who shared that book recommendation? What was, okay, there, it's in my chat. I can go find it. And so most of my chats I don't look back at, but I could if I needed to. And eventually I will probably just delete all those files at the end of the, you know, when we can finally leave our house and not just be on Zoom all the time. So I have that turned on just in case anybody shares anything super important in a session. Here's that play sound when participants join or leave button, and I have it set to heard by hosts only. In this case, that means hosts and co-hosts. Sometimes in these Zoom settings, it'll say host and it will mean only the host, and sometimes it'll mean hosts and co-hosts. So right now I don't have any co-hosts on this call, but I often do, and they also would hear that kind of doorbell sound when people entered the waiting room and the kind of like swoosh sound when people leave. And I think it's super handy, and it can be distracting, but I would way rather hear it than realize like, oh, someone's been in the waiting room for the past 15 minutes, like, sorry. So, you know, having that is, I think, a useful thing. And I can't imagine a situation where you want all of the attendees to hear it. I think that's going to be really annoying. I have no idea how to get the pop-ups on my Mac to turn off. Is there an option to turn the volume off via Zoom, or do I have to go through Mac? Pop-ups in terms I'm sorry, I'm not sure what you mean by volume for pop-ups. Rachel, do you want to come off mute? One of the audio setting things you could do that you could check for is, again, I'll stop screen share really quick. Next to, these are good things to know for everybody, next to the mute microphone on the bottom control bar and next to the video, stop or start video, little, it looks like a camcorder icon, there are these tiny up arrows, right? They look like little triangles without a bottom. You see those? And so that lets you, if you click on that, that'll let you select what speaker or microphone you want to use. If you're using the, if you're on the one that's next to mute, right, that has to do with audio settings. It'll let you test your speaker and audio, switch your audio, just generally do your audio settings. And then the video one lets you pick different cameras if you have them. So right now I'm using a webcam, but I can switch to the built-in webcam in my laptop. It's basically the same view because they're right next to each other. If you have multiple cameras, you can do that. Or that's also where, in this case, I can choose a video filter, which is my pizza hat. It can be there, or choose virtual background. So that's where those features are. So there might be a setting there that helps with your audio settings, Rachel. I'm not entirely sure what you mean by pop-ups in terms of volume, but that might be helpful. And let me know if there's more info. Yeah. Any other questions before we jump back into the slideshow? Cool. All right, here we go. I'm going to screen share again, like email pop-ups in the corner of the screen. That they're making sounds. I think that would be, if you want them to not make notifications, that's probably a notification setting in your Mac, not in Zoom. Zoom is kind of, sound is all or nothing. Like it's all the sounds on your computer or none of the sounds on your computer are being shared. So right now, none of the sounds on my computer are being shared because even when I'm screen sharing, I don't have that sound share button clicked. I'm just sharing the slide deck. But if I wanted to share music again, if there was like a notification, like you got an email and it makes like a ding dong sound, y'all would hear the ding dong sound. So yeah, that makes sense. Thank you. All right, cool. So we are on file transfer. Also on this call, I have file transfers turned on. That's probably one of the things that I would first turn off if I was doing a little bit more public thing. So if you see in the chat box, it says like to everyone, and then there's a little thing called file. If you click on that, you can select a file from your computer or your Google Drive or whatever. So this could be very handy. I could, drop in a file of a PDF of the best Zoom tips or a picture of my cute dog or whatever, and the file would get sent to y'all and you'd see it in chat and you'd have to click on and open it and trust that it's a picture of my cute dog and not an inappropriate picture from the internet. So that is, right, like, if anybody can send a file, anybody can send any type of file. There's no moderation. It doesn't, Tim doesn't send it to me first and I check it and be like, yeah, that's cool. Or like, oh, Tim, why are you trying to share that? It's just all or nothing. So Tim's going to get extra picked on because Tim's also my brother's name. So it's like very easy for me to use that name as an example. But I trust you to only share good, positive things. So that's a thing that, again, it could be really handy. Maybe you have a trusted group and it's very useful internally for your meetings to have file sharing turned on, and maybe for your public calls, you don't want to have it turned on. And that isn't one that you can allow participants to do or not do granularly from the security button, unfortunately. So I would say, use your best judgment, and maybe you have to dip into your settings and change it depending on what type of calls you're offering. Feedback to Zoom, I have that turned on. When you click on the link to join, it makes that screen that's like an annoying window in your web browser, and it's like, was there any feedback to Zoom? I don't know. I don't find out if you send them feedback. There are things I would love you to send them feedback about, but your mileage may vary. Also, at the end of my calls, because I have this display end of meeting experience feedback survey on, you should see a little thing that's like, how was your experience? Thumbs up or thumbs down? If you say thumbs up, nothing happens. It's just like, great, thanks. You can close it out. Also, nothing happens. If you say thumbs down, it'll say, it'll be like, say something like, oh no, what happened? And you have a little text box to record that. And if you write something in there, it goes into that folder in my documents folder that Zoom made that I don't always check. So it doesn't tell me like somebody said thumbs down at your meeting, but I could go back and check those. So it's not a very good evaluation or assessment tool, but it's better than nothing. So, you know, if you just write like, I found you annoying, be like, well, there's not much I can do about that. And if you say like, my sound didn't work the whole time, I might not find out about that unless I'm diligently going and checking all those things. And it doesn't let you customize those. It doesn't let you customize anything. So you can't say like, you know, how likely are you to recommend this training to a friend or anything like that. So if you wanted to actually do assessment, you're going to still use, you know, whatever else you're using for it, Google Forms, SurveyMonkey, all of the other, you know, send an email out to your registrants to say like, hey, please provide feedback for the training. So I like it because it's better than nothing, but also it's not that much better than nothing. Tim said, for file transfer, does Zoom check for viruses in the file? That is a great question that I don't know the answer to. It doesn't, says my husband, who is a computer programmer. So also probably a, yeah, like definitely that is a pretty big trust element that you would have that turned on or off. And you might want to just turn it off. You would not be, you know, unwise to do so. Cool. So co-hosting, if you ever want co-hosting turned on to ever be able to use it. So again, right now on this call, I don't have a co-host, but if I ever wanted to on my account, I need to make sure this co-hosting button is turned on. I would highly recommend another, like waiting rooms, yes, unequivocally turn them on. Also co-host, yes, unequivocally have co-hosting turned on. I would say for most of your public sessions, you're gonna want a co-host or two. That's maybe their job is basically just monitoring the chat and letting people in from the waiting room, and that's all they have to do. It's not super technical, but like it's gonna really make your life a lot easier. I would say that you want a co-host for every public session, you want one person, and then at each 25-person interval, if you have 100 people on a call, I would say you want 4 co-hosts to help with just management. And if you know, like orienting co-host a little bit is a good idea. I would also say if you're using breakout rooms, I highly recommend having a co-host in each breakout room for facilitating conversations. If you haven't been in breakout rooms yet, there's like a couple of weird, just like, they're not even technical issues. They're just like social things. Like it's kind of disorienting to be dropped into a breakout room. People are like, what are we supposed to be doing? So it's very nice to have somebody there who's like, hey, we're supposed to share how we all, you know, work with children in nature today. Like, go ahead and you share your answer. And just being those hosts, it's kind of like, you know, it's kind of like, okay, go to your rooms and work on these things, and being like, what are we supposed to be doing? So having co-hosts to help with that is really nice. They have a lot of the same controls, but not all of the same controls as a host. So that can vary. And you can have unlimited co-hosts. I can make everybody on this call a co-host. I have to do it one at a time through the participants window, but everybody could be a co-host. And I can make people a co-host and then make them not a co-host. So if for instance, someone was like, hey, will you check out this, you know, this registration page we made for my event? Can I share my screen? I could make that person a co-host, and then they would share it and be like, great, cool, talk about it, and then make them a co-host if I wanted to. I can also hand off hosting duties. So if I wanted Carrie to be the host for a little bit on this call, I could make Carrie the host, and then I go back to being just a participant. So ideally, Carrie would make me the co-host again, or a co-host. And the reason you'd want to do that specifically, one of the main reasons are for the things that only the hosts have, which one of those big features is breakout rooms. So only the host ever has the breakout room buttons. The co-hosts don't have it. So if you are going to use breakout rooms a bunch, then, and like if Carrie was like, if we were like, okay, we're planning this out before, I talked to Carrie, I want to make sure that everybody who works with elementary students is in one breakout room and everybody who works with middle school and high school students is in another breakout room. Like Carrie, I would maybe make Carrie the host, and in the background, Carrie would be like putting everybody, you know, we'd have that information in a list and she'd be like placing those together while I talk about what we're going to do in breakout rooms. That's kind of next level. It's kind of advanced. I have a lot of breakout room resources. It's a wild world. That's definitely something we will like go into breakout rooms and play with in that advanced training in a couple weeks. So, and I have a video on my website that I highly recommend that's about 20 minutes about all of the back end for breakout rooms that some friends of mine put together. Can you go into each one of the rooms if you only have two rooms? Two rooms? If you only have two rooms or you only have two people? No. Hosts and co-hosts can move into the different breakout rooms. So you can go into the other rooms, but you don't have a view that's like a God's eye view or a security guard view of what's happening in all the rooms. So, but you can go in there and be like, hey, what's happening in this room? Oh, just making fart noises? That's not great. We're supposed to be doing your homework, you know? So there are some hacks for that. And it seems like there was like a blog post that Zoom wrote like a week ago because everybody's starting school back that's like, we have some new plans to make breakout rooms better for teachers. So I'm hopeful that they roll it out to everybody and not just the education accounts. And maybe that is coming. But I would say like if you can have co-hosts in each of your rooms, that's going to be, you know, and those co-hosts are like trusted people, then that's your best bet. Not ideal, but better than nothing. Polling, again, if you want to use polls ever, you have to have it turned on in your account. I don't use polls on most of my calls, but I do sometimes. If we have time, I can launch a poll and we can play with it a little bit. It's pretty easy. It's pretty rudimentary. The polls are only multiple choice questions, and they're only like a single multiple choice question at a time. So it would be like, you know, like maybe like, you know, what age students do you work with? I could say like, you know, pre-K, kinder, first grade, second, you know, and you can have up to 10 answers. You can decide, you can tell people they can answer, they can select one answer or multiple answers, and those are the only granularity. So you can't really make you can't easily make like a Likert style question. You can't really have an other box where they type in their answers. So again, it's a pretty rudimentary tool, but again, it's on in my settings, so I can use it if I want to. If I need to know right now what your favorite ice cream flavor is, and I'm willing to launch a poll that has a list of ice cream flavors, and you know, if I needed that, I could do it. So it's good. I think it's good to have it turned on. This is this next one, always show meeting control toolbar is another thing. I'm going to stop my screen share again, sorry, so that you all see this. So sometimes you might be on a call where if you're on a computer joining us today or on a phone, I'm not sure if this fixes it for the phones or tablets, but it does for the computer. At the bottom of your screen, it has mute, stop video, participants, chat. It's kind of a black and green bar. Right? It's mostly black, and then there's like an leave meeting button. Folks seeing that on their screens? That is the meeting control toolbar. If this box in your settings, always show meeting control toolbar, is not checked, then that bar disappears like the dock when people aren't active with their mouse in the meeting. So if you know, like if you are kind of passive and you're not paying attention to the computer screen that much, or you're just watching, which is totally valid for most Zoom calls, right? That controls will just disappear and you have to like reactivate your mouse or your cursor to lift them back up. And so I find that for participants who aren't that familiar with Zoom, that's really disorienting to be like, wait, where'd my mute button go? Basically, right? That's the main control. So I think it's very handy to just be like, look, those controls are always there. Like they should be there. They're always there. Like it's yes, it's more clutter, I guess, but it's, you know, better than telling people like, well, just hover your mouse and keep looking for it. So I really like having the show meeting control toolbar turned on. Cool. We're going to get to screen sharing in a second. If you're on the slides still, I'll talk about them so that I can leave the screen share off, but I'll jump back in there in a minute. Show Zoom windows during screen share is turned on so that you have some amount, you can see some of the Zoom stuff. Unfortunately, I think especially for sessions like these, I wish when I shared screen, you were actually seeing like all of the things that I see. That's not entirely true. It's just like you can still see chat participants, some of the Zoom stuff instead of just like fully presentation mode. Again, I think there's times for that. You might want to do that, but I think mostly it's just disorienting when people are like, wait, where did my controls go? So I have show Zoom windows during screen share turned on. I have my screen share default to only the host can share, which also means co-hosts, instead of the other option is all participants. So screen sharing is one of the easiest ways to get Zoom bombed, right? Like somebody can come into this meeting. If you don't have your screen share settings locked down, anybody can share any screen. That screen can have anything that's on the internet happening. So I would say probably a good idea to be protective about who is screen sharing. So my default is that it's only the host. Oftentimes, especially when I'm on calls with like people I know or my friends, I will then go from the button in the bottom of my screen. It says screen share. There's a little up arrow next to it. I can select that. I can say advanced sharing options, and I can change it to all participants. I could also just make any one of you a co-host, and then you would have screen sharing options on this call too. And then if it was all participants, the other setting is who can start sharing screen when someone else is sharing. So if you are letting all your participants share, I usually say only the host can share over someone else's screen, because otherwise it's going to be a situation where like Rachel's trying to share a screen and then Tiffany can be like, oh, I'm sharing screen too, on top of that, on top of that, on top of that, and they're just like screen share battle. That sounds miserable. It might be useful if you like are in a very dynamic meeting with very trusted people and you're like, Rachel, go, Tiffany, go, Jessica, you're up next, like share your screens. But like that, probably not. You could probably just take the time to be like, cool, let me make you a co-host. So yeah, Rachel says, I give public lectures and sometimes those are organized by outside orgs. Then they let me screen share. So you're a co-host, maybe, or probably you're a co-host. It'll say next to your name, like I can make you a co-host right now, Rachel. It'll say like, it said, I just clicked on your name in the participants window. It said, one of the options was make co-host. It says make co-host, make Rachel co-host for this meeting. I can make you the co-host. Now you're a co-host and your name will say in that participants window, it'll say co-host in the parentheses next to your name. You see that? So that's one way to do it. Also, they might just have it that anybody on the call can do screen sharing. So the nice thing too about the co-host is your name jumps to the top of the list. So if I was like, needing your help with something, I'd be like, Rachel, you're right there. I can private chat you right away, especially if there was a lot of people on this call and the list was hard to manage. I can withdraw your co-host permissions. I just withdrew your co-host permissions. So you can, do that again on and off depending on what you want to do and what features you want to allow for a call. And so I have had requests to actually do some screen sharing. So I've done screen sharing. You've seen me do screen share. I'm going to share a whiteboard and we're going to annotate. And this is also a thing that you can turn on or off. I have annotation turned on. And so that means that you can draw and scribble on any of the screens I share, including when I share slides. And you can turn that off. So if you don't want kids to draw, you have to turn annotation off in your settings. I'll show you that in a minute. I'll jump back on the slide deck. But first, I'm going to show you how to scribble on all your slides. So I'm going to share a whiteboard. So I'm going to click on share screen. I'm going to click on whiteboard. I'm going to say share. And now we have whiteboard. It was behind my little window. Here we go. And if you go to the top of your screen, probably there's a little thing that says View Options and then a pull-down menu that says Annotate. And that's what you want to select. And Annotate lets you start drawing. As the host, I can clear this and I can erase anything that anybody draws, but I don't get a preview that like somebody is starting to type bad things. Like it doesn't say like, hey, is that cool that somebody's writing bad things? It's going up there. Or I don't get a warning that somebody started to draw, you know, a big juicy purple eggplant. Like it doesn't just show me that picture first and then approve it. So you can really do anything that you want, and that has to be okay. So kind of a trust exercise. Now that I have, because annotation is turned on in my account, you'll see now when I go back to the screen share, y'all can turn annotation on the same way you just did. View options, annotate, and you can scribble over the slides I'm sharing, which is could be very annoying. So it's kind of an all or nothing situation. And it's very rudimentary in terms of drawing tools, right? So I could just clear everything if it was like, oh gosh, nightmare, you're drawing inappropriate things. But, you know, it's turned on in my account, so you can use it when I'm screen sharing. The other thing you can do instead of just sharing a whiteboard is you can share, like I could share a picture if this was all like teachers from Texas. I could share a picture of a map of Texas and I could tell you all how to annotate, and you could drop a pin wherever you're calling in from, whatever your district you're in from, or things like that. So there are some like pretty useful, fun, interactive ways to do it. And there are also I would say a lot of better side tools. Google Jamboard is one that I see people using, where you would like set up a Jamboard and you'd share the link, and then people could be collaboratively whiteboarding that way. Miro and Mural, they're two different things that sound almost identical. I'll paste those in the chat. But so Jamboard is one that I know a lot of educators use. Miro or Mural are other like sophisticated whiteboard tools for interactive sharing that do a lot more than just this simple, like we can make some little stars and stuff. So I'm going to stop the share, regroup. Anybody have questions about those things? That's annotation and whiteboards. So if you don't want kids, so the short answer for your question, Mel, is if you don't want kids to scribble all over the screen, you need to turn annotation off in your settings. And I can definitely understand why you might want to not let kids do that. I'm sure it's annoying. I'm going to go back to sharing slides. Here we go with that. And then every time I do it, I got to reopen my chat window so I pay attention to it. Move y'all's wonderful images over here. Cool. So that was screen share. And again, I have it set that only the host can launch screen sharing. In this case, that means hosts or co-hosts. So if I wanted to have multiple presenters, I would just make them co-hosts. And I can change that from the meeting too. If I was just like, hey, now it's free for all screen sharing time, I could set that up and change that. Yes, there is only the person who's sharing the screen can annotate now too. So the annotation is turned on in my account right now. So annotation is on. So you could do that. I could say, I could check this box. By default, only the user who is sharing can annotate. So if it's useful, like if for some reason I wanted to, like if this was the type of presentation where it was useful for me to like be like, here is that right there, you know, I can say that only I can do that. Right now, y'all have permission to do it. So you can annotate over this if you want to. You can annotate over the slides. It's not changing my actual slides in Google Drive, but you know, that might be a handy, thank you for pointing that out. That might be a handy feature. I think that annotation tools are so rudimentary that they're not even that useful unless you wanted to do something collaborative, like, you know, everybody put a pin in the map where you're calling in from, or, like let's generate topics on a shared board and talk about what you want to talk about for this session. So yeah, that's where that is. And these are, a lot of these are like that annotation for only the user who's sharing can annotate. That's a pretty new feature in Zoom, a new setting. So like a month ago, that wasn't an option. It was just like all or nothing in terms of annotation. So those are the kind of things that I'm trying to keep up with, so y'all don't have to. So I would say too, if you're using this slide deck as a guide, that it's probably worthwhile like checking for updates maybe monthly. That's just to make sure like your settings are still up to date and like any new, because I will update it because this is my life now. So it doesn't have to be your life. Oh, now I don't want annotation. I just want regular. Okay, so we saw whiteboard. I have my whiteboards to also save. So all of our beautiful scribbles that we had, that is saved as a file in my drives, in my document folder, in the same folder as this Zoom meeting notes for this call. I don't know if I've ever had a useful whiteboard that I really was like, oh God, it can't get erased, but it's also not that big of a file, so it seems fine. And you can let your audience save the whiteboard or not. I don't do remote control style. There are ways you can, so if I turn on remote control, then I can grant permission for somebody to remote in for screen sharing and kind of drive the shared content. That might be useful. I don't do that, mostly because I would just like give you permission to share your screen and do it that way, but that might be something, and there's more information about that here. I do, however, have nonverbal feedback turned on and reactions, which we can talk about in just a second. So nonverbal feedback is turned on, and it's these little icons down here: raise hand, yes, no, go slower, go faster, and reactions, which are these emojis that you have. And I'm going to unshare my screen again, and we can play with those things. So if y'all have the participants window open, you should be able to see a list of your names: my name, your name, a phone number, all that good stuff. And in there, you should have a thing where you could raise a hand. You could say yes or no. You can say go slower or go faster. You could say coffee cup, clap, time. So I really like these from a facilitation and teaching tool standpoint, because I will say like, okay, folks, like today we could talk about, if you want to talk about reptiles, go ahead and put a little yes next to your name. And if you want to talk about birds, go ahead and put a go faster next to your name. Like you can really alternate the way you use these things. They don't need to, these are obviously icons from the before days where it was appropriate in your meeting to tell your facilitator like, well, just go faster. We've already heard all of the details about the TPS reports or whatever, right? Because honestly, the go faster, go slower particularly are, I think, really confusing to kids, because I think they think like, well, I push the go faster button, but nothing is happening because it's not like an actual fast forward button. It's just to give feedback like, yeah, we get it. Stop talking about annotation, And so whether or not that's useful, and maybe you do orient your students to say like, hey, I'm going to recap some of this information that we talked about last time about long division. Let me know if you want me to slow it down or go faster by using those icons, but mostly, I'm still going to cover it just as fast as I was. These are something you have to turn on if you ever want to use it in your account. I would say that the most useful one of these is that raise hand. If somebody wants to use the raise hand, I'll demonstrate. It will jump your name to the top of the list. Thanks, Eileen. So that, and for me, I can see, I don't know if other people can, but in Eileen's picture, there's a little blue hand icon. So it's kind of like a notice to me that like, oh, that person, especially if there were 100 people on the call. Okay, yeah, I don't think you can see it, but so I can see that Eileen has her hand up, and I can say like, oh, did you have a question? Or just a second, Eileen, if you have a problem, raise your hand, things like that. I have a button that says lower hand. So even just in terms of, educators everywhere being thrilled that they can actually lower students' hands. Now you can do that safely, but the push of a button. So Rachel, it's in the participants window. It's not the same. Yeah, there you go. It's not the same. Unfortunately, some of these are duplicates from the reactions, but then these things that we're talking about now are these nonverbal feedback, the yes, no, the raise hand, the coffee mug. There is a thumbs up and a thumbs down and a clap. So they're kind of handy. I don't use them a whole lot, but I like to have that just turned on in my account in case I want to use it. And then the other things that we're mentioning are another thing. I just pushed the clear all button, so all yours are cleared, but you can play with them again if you want. But the other thing that's similar to this is those reactions. So in that meeting control toolbar, there should be a little smiley face icon. And if you click on that, it says reactions. If you click on that, you get this clap hands next to the corner of your, or a thumbs up. Those only stay up for 10 seconds and then they disappear. You can change the skin tone in your video settings on your Zoom account. And if you don't have the updated version of Zoom that includes the pizza hat, you also don't have the other new reactions, including heart, laughing, crying face, ta-da, or wow face. That's the whole set that they have right now. So if you have an updated Zoom, you probably have more of those icons. So that's how to do those. And again, those are sometimes useful and they don't stay. So you'd have to, if you were using them to say, okay, who wants to, if you want to learn about, like if you want to do this reading, click a heart. And if you want to do the other reading, click the, laughing face, you'd have to do pretty quick assessment of what people are voting for. So I like to, like, especially if I'm working with kids, I'd be like, let's give a round of applause. And instead of letting everybody come off mute and make loud noises that are distracting, just be like, let's give a quiet applause, or that sounds great, thumbs up, so using those is handy. You can have them turned on or off in your account, just like so many of these things. Rachel, you were able to do a hands up, right? I think you saw that. If you are co-hosts, do not have the hands up, so that's kind of annoying. Like when you are a co-host, or a host, I don't have the hands up button, so I can only do yes, no, go slower, go faster, or those more icons. So just as a heads up, that's how that works. All right, let's go back into the slides. Here we go. Pull up chat. And so meeting reactions are turned on. Those are those emojis. Nonverbal feedback is these little icons we just used. That's turned on this account. And then this other option, allow removed participants to rejoin. So that would mean if I actively removed you, so I would have to do that either from the participants window or next to your name, the host and co-host can remove people. Right now, I can click on the little ... next to Rachel's name. I'm not going to remove you, don't worry. And I can I can either put you back in the waiting room, which I'm also not going to do, or I can remove you entirely from this call. So if I was like, I don't know, this person's been asking weird questions and, drew something inappropriate on our whiteboard, I could put you in the waiting room and be like, okay, I'm going to put you in the waiting room and give you a minute to come back, and be appropriate about Zoom. And then I could invite you back into the waiting room. Or if I was clearly well, this person is not here for the right reasons, I can remove you entirely from this session. And if I said remove, you would be kicked out of the meeting. And in this case, you couldn't just click on the link in your email and come back in, right? Yeah, so the going back in the waiting room, I feel like that's a good timeout. And then fully remove is you're suspended, So I'm if I have to do that, remove you entirely from the call, I don't want you just clicking on the link and being back in the waiting room and annoying again. So I've just made it so that you can't rejoin if I actually remove you. If you're worried that somehow you or your co-host will accidentally remove a person, it's not easy to do. It requires going to that person's thing, clicking it would take a little bit of work. So hopefully that's, worth actually doing. I would suspect that I would not want you, in fact, actually on the call. So who knows? We'll see. That is just the choices I have made about my account. So your mileage may vary. And then below is that screen capture from the Zoom settings of the general settings if you wanted to change your reaction tones. That is the place to do it there. So that's in the Zoom, just on your own Zoom account, not the zoom.us settings, but like in this call, you can do that too. So that is a screen capture of that. Hi, John. We're just going through Zoom things. And if you have questions, you can add them in the chat. Right now, we're just going through a list of the settings in the slides of all of the ways to set up Zoom. Nope, you just dropped out. Okay. Cool. So again, I talked about this a little bit. Allow participants to rename themselves. You have that privilege, and you could also turn that off if you don't want people to be able to rename themselves. I think this is super useful in terms especially of breakout rooms, because if there were, even with only now 10 people on this call, I don't know if y'all work with, say you're all teachers, I don't know if you work with elementary kids or middle schoolers or whatever. So what I can't, if we were doing breakout rooms, I could have you rename yourself. And if you work with, elementary school, you could I could say like put an ES in front of your name or a MS or a HS, and then everybody on the call would sort themselves with their name markers. Or if you want to talk about, if you want to go to a breakout room and listen to this storybook that somebody's reading, or if you want to learn about this other storybook, you can go and jump in and do those. So I do think renaming is handy. And like I mentioned before, it's a place where you can literally rename yourself any word. So think about the words that you do or do not want to see people using. So I have it turned on that you can do that, and you might want to not allow people to do that. Same thing with that hide participant profile pictures in meetings. Right now, I have that turned off, so your profile pictures are not hidden. So if you have a profile picture like I do, I have that icon of my logo. If I stop my video, you see that image. Again, that could be any image that you load up on your Zoom account, so it could be something inappropriate. So they've added these features because probably mostly kids were slightly abusing those privileges. So you might want to turn them off or not. I just talked to someone I collaborate with today, and he shared with me, he's got, I think, a 7 or 8 year old, and he's like, yeah, early on when we were doing distance learning in the spring, one of my my times I was not proud of how technical my child is I walked past their room and I heard them yelling, quick, everybody, the teacher's letting us rename ourselves. Do that now. So that the teacher hadn't turned that off, and everybody could rename themselves any little, little stinker names they wanted to rename themselves. So the kids will find out how to do it much faster than the rest of us. So, and certainly much faster than Zoom can turn those settings on or off. So, worth paying attention to these things. I also don't have to do this often. I don't think I've ever done this, but I can report participants to Zoom. Hosts can report meeting participants for inappropriate behavior to Zoom's trust and safety team. So I have that turned on in case I have to use it. So again, that would be like next to their name. You can remove somebody or report somebody or do both. And I have that turned on in case I need to use it. So I hope, we don't have to use it, but I could if I needed to. Yeah. Breakout rooms, again, I have these turned on so that I could use them in my account. Most of my meetings, I don't use breakout rooms, but I have the feature turned on. So this is something you need to do. You can also turn it on so that you can assign participants to breakout rooms when scheduling. I feel like that's very clunky, even though actually manually assigning people to breakout rooms can be clunky in the meeting, because I don't know who's actually going to show up to my meetings. Like there were 30 something people who registered for this session, and I think at the peak we had like 14 people here, 14 or 16 people. So like if I had taken the time to put everybody in breakout rooms, and then I just made a room that accidentally only has one person that actually shows up to the meeting, and then one room that has, 8 people, like that's going to be a big old mess. And I'd rather just like take the time and do the planning with my co-host in that case to actually have a breakout room with, y'all in it. So that's what I would prioritize, but it could be useful, especially if you have recurring groups that are very consistent in attendance. You might want to have that feature turned on. Like your classroom, like if it was just, a set group of students, then yeah, it's going to be easier to do it ahead of time. Remote support, I also don't, it's more of the like remote in type of thing. I don't do that kind of IT, but so I don't have it turned on my account. It might be kind of fun to play with. The link right there will tell you more about that. Closed captioning sounds great. I think accessibility is super important. I think that's one of the big things, that like obviously forcing everybody to go online. There's like lots of equity and accessibility issues that are hard to address. And the closed captioning in Zoom right now is a thing that if you want to send a message to Zoom, please send it about closed captioning, because right now, if you have closed captioning turned on your account, as the host, I have a button in my control panel that I can push, and it will say, all right, who on this call would you like to designate as the person who will type the closed captions? So I'd be like, Carrie, I hope you can type fast. and Carrie would get a little text window like the chat box, but it would be specific to closed captions, and anything you type in there would appear across the meeting screen as a caption. So you can pay somebody, and I do have resources for that. Like if you are doing a public meeting that you do want actually transcribed, I have some resources for both companies where you can hire people to do that. The rate I've heard quoted is about $100 an hour, which is not terrible if it's like an important public meeting that you want made accessible, right? Like if you're doing a city council meeting and you really want everybody to, attend and be able to do it, like, yes, like you should probably be paying that, like, just like you would pay an interpreter and all that other good stuff. And then you can also alternatively, you can link to a service that like basically a robot is picking up what you say, and the captions aren't going to be as good as someone who's trained to type, who can understand if I say a word a little bit funny and different. But that's a lot cheaper. So I have links to some of those things. I've also seen closed captions used as a feature in Zoom as a tool, not specifically to do all of the captioning of every single thing I say, but to do highlights. So like if this was a workshop and there were I might have my co-host be my captioner, and in this case, let's just pretend Carrie's graciously offered to do this, and she's just typing like, for the next step, we need scissors, paper, and a pen. And so she writes like scissors, paper, go get it, scissors, paper, pen, and that's the only thing that appears in captions, right? Because you can do as much or as little as you want. So it could be useful to turn on, and it's not like a magic bullet where you turn that on and then your session's magically captioned, unfortunately, because that would be amazing. So hopefully that is something that Zoom is working on. I'm sure they're getting a lot of requests. I have sent them requests. I know a lot of the people that I collaborate with have too, because it would obviously make it a lot more accessible for a lot more people. So that's what closed captioning is about. Far end camera control lets you potentially, if you have the type of camera that does zoom in or tilt and things like that, I could assign that to somebody else. So if I was doing something very manual and I didn't have access to my own camera controls, again, somebody could be like, oh, zoom in on that, like Emily's holding up that important thing, zoom in on it, and they could do that kind of TV production value. I don't have that kind of camera. I don't do those kind of calls. I just hold things up to the mic closer or not. So I have that turned off. Group HD video. You could have higher quality video for everybody if you have this turned on. I think that it definitely is a bandwidth sink. So again, in the interest of making everybody or more people be able to engage with my calls, I have that turned off, because I'm like, you don't need to see me in more HD than you're already seeing. This is plenty good. There might be situations where you want, where you're doing an event. Like I did attend an event that was a fashion show on Zoom, and like they probably want HD video, so really depends. Virtual backgrounds, some of you are using virtual backgrounds. You can have those totally turned off, just like any number of things on Zoom. Any picture on the internet and even videos can now be virtual backgrounds if you allow videos for virtual backgrounds. So somebody can have just a fully inappropriate picture or video as their virtual background, and you can either turn it off or turn off all virtual backgrounds, or, trust that people make good choices. So again, I'm working mostly with people that I trust or I know we can develop mutual trust, so I have it turned on, but you might turn that off if you're worried about it. Video filters. Now, these are the things like the pizza hat that I'm wearing. So this is a newish feature, and you can turn them off if you're like, my God, I cannot imagine having a session where my participants can choose any silly video filter they want, including much more distracting things than the pizza hat, like this deer, for instance. Again, this is an all or nothing. You can't say like pizza hat's fine, but please don't be a pirate, because it's just all or nothing. So you can turn those off in your calls. Again, you might want to do that depending on the type of groups that you're working with. These guest participants in the meeting or webinar are for accounts that are officially linked. So that would be for like the business account or the enterprise account, where we link our accounts because, me, Tim, Mill, Carrie, Eileen all work for the same company, and we work with outside people. And so anybody on our call in the participants window, they'd be like highlighted in a color that like these are your internal people and these are your external people. I don't have that turned on because it's either like me and the people I know, or like people that don't. I'm just my own company, so it's not that important. Auto answer group in chat enables users to see and add context to auto answer group in the contact list in chat. Any call from members of this group will be automatically answered. Again, this is a feature of those more advanced shared accounts. I don't have it turned on because I don't recommend, even though I feel like it's tempting to be like, well, Emily, collaborate with my friend Maggie, and she has a paid Zoom account and I have a paid Zoom account, so we should link our accounts, right? It's actually like weird in terms of scheduling. It's much better, honestly, to just let Maggie sometimes, if she needs to use my account for some reason, like if I'm like, hey, I can't start my call, can you log in as Wildly Supportive or as Emily and start that account, to just do that and have it separate, because otherwise all of the meetings are stacked and staggered in the list together. It's weird. It gets annoying. I don't recommend it until they come out with a better like system sharing that isn't an enterprise account. We're almost done with these settings, so then we can just open it up for the last 15 or so minutes. These are a lot of just like default email invite, email settings. I have them turned off. I have the Zoom echo canceling and enhancements turned on. That's this last one, but you could do original sound, let people select original sound. I don't have that turned on. It's not, I think you might want to do that if you're doing lots of music type events or sharing lots of like if someone's playing their guitar, you might want to turn off the echo canceling things on your end, if that's what the call is about. Otherwise, I have all these turned off and I have more info about it. I haven't done live streaming meetings. I'm just kind of showing the highlights. We're getting really far into it now, but you could turn that on. I haven't explored it yet, but it does let you stream through a streaming service. Like if this meeting was being live streamed on YouTube, we could do that, and I would have to turn that on. This is a fairly new feature. I can request permission to unmute. So at the beginning of this call, you might have had a pop-up window that said like, do you give the host permission to unmute you? And some of you might have said yes, and some of you might have said no. I would say good hosts are going to still ask, hey, is it okay if I unmute you? Because even like right now, especially since lots of people have videos off, like I don't want to just suddenly unmute Eileen, because if she's dealing with some loud situation or excuse herself to go to the restroom or whatever, like I don't want to put her audio on blast and everybody has to hear, what's going on. So I would still say like there's some amount of like good hosting and consent things to pay attention to. And if you're working with the same people all the time, once you give the host permission on that account to unmute, so like if you were working with the same kids regularly and they keep on forgetting, they're just like, you know, talking and they're on mute and you can just see them move their mouths and you're just like, oh my God, you're on mute again. You know, like it might be handy to be like, kid, you're on mute. I'm going to unmute you. Now go, you know, because that could happen probably every day. And it'll feel like you're, you know, in another kind of, you know, quarantine hell where that's all you do. So I can see the benefits and the disadvantages to that. Email notification settings. Again, these are like when Zoom emails me. So I have most of these turned on, and the one when attendees join a meeting before the host, I would recommend turning that off. That means that anytime anybody clicks on the link before you, so if I emailed you on Wednesday with this link and you or last week Wednesday and you accidentally clicked on the link, it would email me and it would say like, Rachel is joined the meeting. And I'd be like, well, Rachel, the meeting's next Tuesday, so don't worry about it. You know, I don't need an email every time that happens. So I have that one turned off, and these other things I have turned on. So you can read more about that. No worries, Rachel. Thank you for being here. Couple other quick things. The email invitation right now in my account, it's set to be in English, but you can change it if you work with there's a whole list of other languages. So if you are working with audiences of different languages, you could set it to a different language and it will generate that, like where it says like Wildly Supportive is inviting you to a Zoom meeting. It'll say that in Spanish or whatever language you select. I don't have anybody else on my account, so I don't have scheduling privileges for anybody else. And the last thing there is that integration authentication key, which is like a string of special numbers and letters that is associated with my account that I would use if I was like linking a third-party app. So an example of that might be like if I did get a closed captioning robot system that I was paying for and I wanted to link it with this account, or if I wanted to live stream, I would add in those keys and that security code, and that would be like, okay, it's linked to your account specifically. So that's what that means. That is pretty much all in terms of the Zoom settings. So more information, these are links to things that people ask me about a lot, like host and co-host privileges, saving chat in Zoom, the difference between a Zoom meeting and a webinar, sharing music over Zoom, all those things are there and linked. And then my contact info and my resources. Again, all of the stuff that I shared today, this is the main thing we did is this Zoom settings slide deck. So that's here on my website at wildlysupportive.com/Zoom. I'll email these out to you as well. Eventually, this video will be linked down below. This advanced Zoom features slide deck is the training I have in 2 weeks, and I'm pretty much planning on just offering these every month, the settings and the advanced features and settings and advanced features, one each month until people stop coming to them. So as long as they're useful, you know, please tell your people, come to them. I don't have my October version of this up yet, but it will be up on Eventbrite. I have like free tickets for all of them, and other resources here. Here's that breakout room video that if you're going to, it's about 20 minutes long, but if you're going to host breakout rooms, I highly recommend you watching it. And then at any point, feel free to email me. That is, especially right now, if you have questions, either they're very easy for me to answer because I've answered them already for 1 million people, or they're like, wow, that's a great question. I don't know, I'm gonna find out, and then I learn something new too, so that's really great. So don't hesitate to do that. I also have a Calendly set up so that you can make 30-minute appointments with me. If you're like specifically like, hey, I'm supposed to run a trivia night for my, you know, like organization next month and I really need help setting that up, like jump on a call with me and we'll tackle it together. So please feel free to do that. I'm going to stop the screen share for the last 10 or so minutes and check in with y'all. What questions do you have? What else do you want to know? Yeah, Tim.
Hi, thanks. I just have a question. Is it okay if I'm on audio or should I?
It's wonderful. Thank you.
Just to be clear on the remote control thing, I know you said you don't use it, but would that be, because Eileen and I work together and I'm going to be doing the demos and she's going to be the host. So if the camera needed to be, my camera needed to be moved, she could actually do that if I, with the remote control feature. Is that what that does?
If you have a camera that has that tilt pan zoom in, zoom out, yes,
Got it.
that's the camera control one specifically. Otherwise, there are like have you know like if you've ever worked for an organization that's like I used to work for the county, and so they had like county IT, and if something was, if you're like, hey, I need to change my login or whatever, you call a number and then they're like, okay, I'm gonna remote in, and then like suddenly your mouse is moving and it's somebody else. You can do that over Zoom, so that like if for some reason you needed to co-present that way, you know, and it was handy to have someone else do it. I don't do it, and I co-present all the time, and we just are both either host and co-host, and we just talk through like, okay, now, you know, now Tim's going to share a screen, talk about things, or now, you know, like now, well, I'm presenting, I'm going to ask Carrie to set up our breakout rooms, you know, and I'll just like talk through those things, and they just happen. So there are, you know, I think it could be handy, and I don't know if it's just honestly more confusing. Good question.
And I have one other question. I'm so curious what the advanced features are. Is that breakout rooms?
Yes. So the main things we cover are, I'll open up polls and show you behind the scenes. Breakout rooms for sure. That's like a thing people ask about all the time. There's a new feature in Zoom that shares slides as desktop or as virtual backgrounds. So it lets you, this is an advanced screen sharing feature. So right now when I share slides, it's like you still see like a couple little pictures, including mine and my slides. And if you share slides as virtual backgrounds, it would be my slide and my video would be in the bottom right corner, and you'd see me like kind of like a newscaster. So that's kind of cool, especially for kids, because they're like, you know, you share a screen and then kids are like, where did you go? I'm like, look at the slides, don't worry about it. But the other things that get covered in that, I'm pulling it up right now. And again, there is like already a version of this already recorded, so you can just see it spotlighting video. That's pretty huge, and it's easy. I can show you right now. At any point, so if you're looking at the call in gallery view like I am now, I see, you know, in this case, 9 pretty little boxes of everybody, and I can say like, I'm going to spotlight my own video so I don't put anybody on blast, but this is forcing my video to be essentially the speaker view, regardless of if I'm the one who's talking. And so the reason that this is super handy is in those situations where you're, you know, presenting something and you want to see it up close, that I can hold something up, oh, my pizza hat, and you can see this bigger, because even though you're looking at it in gallery view, I put it in spotlight and you see me. So now I'm unspotlight, you can go back to gallery view, things like that. Registration, I go over how to actually set up the registration page in Zoom in advanced features and talk about like the benefits and pitfalls of that. I use both the registration in Zoom and I use Eventbrite in tandem sometimes, especially if I'm charging ticket costs. Yeah, those are some of the things that we go in advanced features. And then a lot of it is like people will have specific, like, you know, weird questions that are like, yeah, let's talk through how to do that. So great questions. What else? A couple more minutes.
So thanks, Emily. I learned a lot from this, and I'm looking forward to that advanced features class. I'm going to be running a parent-child program over Zoom. I work with children ages 5 and under and their families. So we're going to be reading books and going over activities together from the kits that they're getting from the museum, and
nice.
trying to teach. Hopefully I'm getting a green screen, so you can add new backgrounds to the. Mm-hmm. Okay, that's great. I'm gonna be broadcasting from home, but I'm going to be teaching with museum objects, hopefully on the green screen in the background. We're still figuring that one out.
Yeah, the share slides as video would be a really good way to do that. And you have to share them as PPTX files, so that you have to either make them or download them to either Keynote if you're on a Mac or PowerPoint if you're on a Windows machine. That sounds really great and really doable. Green screen will help a little bit. And if your computer's not fast enough, it's still not going to be perfect. So don't go out of your way. You might first just try to set up in a space where you have a pretty clean background. My background is like the absolute worst for virtual backgrounds. My computer is a new, since the pandemic, MacBook Air, so it's not the fastest processor. It still can't support, but even though I literally bought it like in April or something, it's very new. It's still like, I don't know what to do with that because that's really light, that's really dark, like it's just a huge mess. So I do have a green screen, but I just don't even use it because I'd rather just be like this. And the share slides is a way to do that. And I'm putting it in chat right now. These are things for you diehards that stayed on this whole time. Irion and Epoch Cam are two apps that are both app and software for your computer. Irion is totally free. Epoch Cam, there is a version that's free, but I've heard that it's glitchy. So there's an $8 app that let you turn your phone into a webcam or document cam. So if you're doing like artifact sharing, or you want to document share, like here's a book or something, I'm going to do this right now. I'm going to go into on my phone, I'm going to open up the app. In this case, I'm going to use Irion. So I open that. It's like, okay, I'm waiting for that. I'm going to select the camera. And even though it's my phone, it says Irion in that little list. And so now it's going to, it says looking for the phone. And there is me looking down at my desktop. That's my coaster. This is my keyboard. This is my book that's on my desk. So I'm using my phone as a document cam, and if I was really doing this, I would like have a little stand so you wouldn't have to see it be all moving and weird like that. But that is a totally free thing that you too can have, and if you have a camera phone. So things like that I'm gonna keep up with so you don't have to. So
that's great, thank you.
Yeah, sure, of course.
Yeah, actually, Beth, Diane, and Megan were all like the rest of my department. So
cool.
I'm going to be transferring
nice.
this to the rest of them
awesome.
tomorrow.
Yeah, and again, I'm going to have this recorded. Y'all are welcome to reach out to me. Don't hesitate. Like this is truly like a big part of what I'm doing and a big part of what I feel like a contribution to the world. Feel free to share that Zoom setting slide deck with everybody. Like it's something I can do when times are really tough, especially for, in this case, museum folks, but pretty much everybody. So yeah, thank you for being here, everybody. Anybody else for our last couple minutes?
I just wanted to say thank you for your contribution to the world.
Thanks.
And I appreciate that.
Yeah, of course. I appreciate y'all taking the time. I know it's weird. It's weird to be like, I guess I'm going to go to that. I hope it's good. So I hope it was useful. Thank you for trusting me.
Better than I expected. It's wonderful. Thanks.
Thanks. Thank you. Thank you. And feel free to connect and hope it was helpful. And yeah.
Okay.
Thanks, y'all. Have a great rest of your day. Let me know if you have questions. Yeah,
Thanks.
Take care.
Bye.
Yeah. Thanks so much, Tim. It was great. Appreciate all your great questions. Thanks, Eileen.
You made my life so much easier.
Good. I'm glad. Don't hesitate to reach out. That's what I want to do. I'm doing this so, so that you can have a person who's like, wait, I have a question about Zoom. I'm going to ask Emily. So feel free.
That may happen. That definitely may happen.
That's totally fine. Please do it.
Okay.
Thank
Thanks,
you. Bye.